Came across, as I always do, came across an interesting link on the Twitters to Red Hunt Labs, who've done a cool project where they've scanned the App Store, the Android App Store, and looked for like privacy leaks. Private keys that are embedded into apps and tracking pixels and CDNs that are in use and stuff like this. There were some really interesting findings. Not as interesting as I was hoping, really, but definitely some meat to this report, and it really well presented as well, I have to say. So we're gonna have a little chat about that on today's not so critical update. Yeah, I think it's good. They found a whole bunch of secrets that were found in there. I think this is one of the things that's I've always wondered about apps that use private services or services that you have to pay for. Is how do you properly encrypt or like hide the authentication details? Anything that's rate limited, that you would normally have to pay for, or that's like a private, like our company provided a cloud service, but we have authentication and we give the customers keys or logins to be able to use it. And how do you embed that in an app that you then distribute through an app store like Android, Google Play, or whatever?
Sure.
And I guess you don't in a lot of cases.
Well, this is in a way related to the earlier story we did about Toyota. And Jon talked about how kind of trivial it is to search for whether these keys are involved or not. We didn't provide a lot of context, but basically what's happening is these API keys are essentially like a password for the service. And if it is available to the public or somebody comes across your API key, they theoretically could use your API key to access that service and misuse it, abuse it, sabotage it, whatever. And that's what they did here. The researchers scanned, 30,000 apps in the App Store, and found a huge number of them had these keys just visible and available for anybody who cared to look.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy if you're like technologically apt to go decompile an Android app. You basically extract the APK file, and then you use an Android decompiler on your computer to go look at what is there inside. And what this what the researchers mentioned was the Android's manifest file, which is a really important file that every app has to have. And inside of this manifest file, it basically lists a bunch of parameters, permission requests, and sometimes API keys, which is really bad because the manifest file is normally not in any way protected or encrypted. So the API key is just there for everyone to read.
I don't think it can be. It
has to be read by, it's what, an XML file. So it has to be read by the system, by the Android operating system. But there are ways to protect these API keys using something like a secrets manager that you call, that the app calls and says, hey, I'm the app, I'm real, I'm legitimate, I'm verified and authenticated. I need this API key. And you can do all of this super securely without having to have a key out in the public for everyone to know how to look.
Yeah, that's what I always wondered about. How do you do it properly? Secrets management is a tricky problem to solve because there's always one weak point. Like the secrets manager itself has to be secure, and if you hack that, then
right.
Yeah. And where do you store how to access the secrets manager? And it's complex.
And what form of authentication does the device use when it calls the secrets manager and says, hey, I need this key? And then how do you transfer the secrets manager securely? And there's a bunch of things that you need to jump through to make sure that you're doing it properly. The alternative is, of course, that a lot of these companies, a lot of these app makers, many of them know. And they sit in their little boardroom or in their Zoom call and they say, okay, we're leaking. We know we're showing in plain text this Google services, which was the highest one mentioned in the research that they conducted. We're showing this Google Services API key. It's out for the public. How much effort is it going to take to fix this? Okay, X versus Y, which is, do we leave it?
Yeah.
Many will say, why we leave it? Because X is too strenuous. It's too much effort for them to be able to say the cost versus the risk is not worth it. So we're going to leave it.
Which might seem dumb, but it does make sense because it's a higher cost. That's it. They've got two options. Both are going to cost something. And if it costs less to just leave it there, then fine.
Yep.
You know?
Until someone figures out that there is a Google Services API key
and then
is using zero authentication, and you get to just go spam this thing.
Yeah, so that's the risk evaluation that they have to make.
Consider.
So the other interesting thing about this report that I thought was that it talked about the permissions that different apps have. One thing that stood out to me was that it found something like 9,700 unique permissions, which I didn't know that apps they were that many different. No. So permissions for apps are things like ability to read SMSs or ability to send SMSs, use the internet, use the camera, access any kind of part of thing, and then access other apps as well, and all the different kind of combinations of using those things. And so, there's all these different things which I knew about, but I didn't know there were 9,700 different types of permission, which is crazy. And
that's mind-boggling.
There was one app which had asked for the most number of permissions. So it was being asked to be able to do is basically anything. It was 244 individual permissions for one single app. Normally,
Alipay.
when you install an app, if it says, "Oh, this app wants to use your microphone, will you allow it or not?" and you say yes, and then you've given it permission to do certain things. There's other stuff which is kind of like baked in, like I think being able to use the internet, stuff like that. But this 244 different things he wants to do, remarkable.
So, which one was it? You said Alipay.
Yes, I think that was one.
I could see why they would want this, and I wonder if like something like PayPal or Bank of America or any big anything financial will probably have a similar amount of permissions, and I'll tell you exactly why. It's for device. What?
Fraud prevention.
Fraud prevention.
Sorry.
For device fingerprinting. This makes perfect sense, and to be honest, I'm okay with it. Like, I am totally fine with that.
Yeah, because they're not going to misuse that, are they?
No.
They're going to be fine. Yeah. Why would they misuse those permissions?
But the intent there is good. The intent is to protect the customer, to make sure that fraud doesn't happen. To minimize the risk.
Someone's intent is, but then the marketing department's intent is going to be slightly different.
I guess we don't know that the permissions are all like privacy related stuff too, right? Like, it could be permission to draw on the screen, to access certain menus, to access the notification system. We don't know. They could all be completely malicious. We have no idea. I think maybe to John's point, like, it's good that they're asking for permission instead of just doing it.
Well, a lot of it, the system just gives. The 200, you're not going to press accept for 200 requests. What basically you're saying is this app wants to access 200 different flags or whatever on your system. You're going to be asked about 5. You're going to be asked about your contacts. You're going to be asked about your camera, things like that, microphone.
The scary thing is that when that app gets hacked, or there's a security vulnerability in that app, then you're kind of
now in trouble, right?
Yeah, because then it can do anything, and so can whatever hacked it.
Yeah.
It also sounded like there was a little bit of a situation potentially where the packages could get updated behind the apps, and we saw that with what was the one a couple months ago that widely used?
It was a Java. Was that the Java
Log4j.
Yeah, Log4j.
Yeah, widely used backend library. Yes. I don't think that's the one I'm thinking of, but similar idea. The backend library gets compromised, and potentially the app then. Any app that uses that library goes along.
Oh, no, that's not what it was. Log4j just had a vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was compromised. It was, but yeah, this happens all the time, especially when they have so many different frameworks and packages, and one of them does get compromised, and then now we're looking at a supply chain attack where from the top level down, it trickles down into individual users of these services.
It doesn't even have to be that the package was compromised. It could just be that the package author decides to fuck with people, which happened with the NPM package, where one guy was like anti-Ukraine or something.
Right.
Yeah, and it was colors.
Colors, that's it. Yeah.
NPM libraries, colors, and Faker, breaking thousands of apps.
Yeah.
Which we did a story on 8 months ago.
Wow.
That's a downside to open source, funny enough. So there aren't many.
Okay.
But it is
implementation of open source.
Open source.
Yeah.
Of course, you can implement it with like a multi-key, multi-approval process where multiple people have to approve a change.
Yeah.
There's ways to protect yourselves from this, but when it's a single contributor owning so much power to a service, then
it's an interesting situation for somebody.
So you'll make blanket attacks on marketers all day long, Peter, but as soon as John says something critical about open source, it's like, oh, whoa, they're not all the same.
I think
you know what, Mike? Yes, I will. I'm sorry. I do not believe in the fundamental goodness of marketers.
Peter, I wonder how many connections you can break.
What? Me?
Just by implementing, just blocking something like Google on your list. I wonder how many millions of people overnight will just not have internet anymore for a temporary,
One or
I feel like he's done that.
I did it with T.co,
with
which
Twitter,
is, and talked about that. There's
APIs.google.com gone.
So
just down. I do want to know how many people use uBlock, and
I've estimated the number of users at about 50 million. I think
50.
I think so.
So you hold the power at your fingertips. You're
Peter's the gatekeeper of the internet.
Yeah.
The more insidious way of doing it is holding people to ransom and like doing it with a smaller kind of organization that isn't going to get, ranted about on Twitter, and putting them on the list and then saying, I'll take you off, if you send me an Xbox or something like that. I don't know. Then that people aren't going to notice that and add exclusion stat. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I've thought about this.
Peter's like, I've thought about it. I've dreamt about it.
Yeah.
There's a devil and an angel on a shoulder arguing.
And the other way is to people could pay me to take them off the list.
Right, of course.
Which
is not true. People can't do that.
No, to be clear,
when Peter shook the AdBlock Plus guys' hands, he was like, "You motherfuckers."
I have never accepted any money to take people off my list.
Right. Sure.
Or to put them on.
Also,